Masal khair. Right now we're going to talk about dual nouns in Arabic. You may have seen a preview of the dual, or you may know a little bit about how nouns work, but here we're going to talk about pretty much every single possibility that we could encounter in formal Arabic where we would need to modify a dual noun or anything that refers to it. In spoken colloquial, we tend only to use the dual when it comes to nouns and the adjectives that describe them. But in Al-Arabi al-Fusha, modern standard Arabic, we need to modify pretty much every single particle in a sentence that refers back to those nouns. It's not optional. It's considered incorrect if we don't do that. If we were talking about the relationship between two countries, for example, or two people, we would need to make all the adjectives dual. We would need to make all the verbs that those two things or individuals did together dual, etc. Right now, we're only talking about nouns and pronouns. Here is a chart with most of the situations you will ever encounter, most of the alternatives that we will need in al-muthanna, in this column. And for reference, here is al-mufrad, the singular version of all of these forms. So as you can see, we have different subject pronouns, we have different object pronouns, we have a different ending that we would put onto a regular noun. I've chosen kitab and sayyara, book and car, as two fairly normal nouns that hopefully you know. Different relative pronouns instead of alladhi and allati in singular. We have different versions. And different demonstrative pronouns as well. It's pretty linear. In fact, you could argue that in some cases it's a bit simpler because, for example, the subject pronoun forms huwa and hiya are different, but in the dual, they're not. We can use the same version. Excuse me, there is a typo here. The same is true for the second person subject pronouns. It is entuma that we have, not homo once again. There is one little wrinkle, which is that for nouns and relative pronouns and demonstrative pronouns, we have two versions that we could use depending on whether the word in a given instance in a particular sentence is marfu'a or mansub or majroor. We have videos about all of those terms and when we should expect to use them in a fully vocalized sentence. You can go check those out if you need a refresher. Basically, if a noun or some kind of pronoun is in the marfu'a case, the ending is going to be an. One book, kitab, two books, kitaban. If it's in mansub or majroor, it's going to take the same slightly modified ending, ayn instead, with a fatha followed by a ya and a noon instead of and alif and a noon. This may seem like a lot of information, but luckily it's fairly regular. We can see that that is true for nouns, for relative pronouns, alladhan, alladhain, allatan, allatain, and also for demonstrative pronouns. Havan, havain, hatan, hatain. So all we're doing is taking that alif and flattening it out from an to ain. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. I have some sentences here that are written in the singular, and what we're going to do is try to modify all of the nouns and pronouns in the sentence to talk about two things instead. Here's number one. هذه هي المقالة التي قرأتها منذ أسبوع. This is the article that I read a week ago or 1 week ago. Now suppose I want to say these are the two articles that I read 2 weeks ago. We have to change a bunch of things in this sentence. هذه, just for one feminine singular object. So instead I would say هاتان هما. These here are the two articles. المقالتان. Notice that so far we only have مرفوع endings. We haven't had any prepositions, we haven't had any verbs that they're the object of, so we can stick with مرفوع. التي is going to switch to اللتان. I am still singular, I read them. قرأت. But I read two of them, not one, so I need that object pronoun for two. قرأتهما. منذ not 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. منذ أسبوعين. This is مجرور because of منذ. منذ أسبوعين. In this construction, منذ is a preposition, and this is technically sort of an إضافة. Ago, 2 weeks. So as you can see, we would need to sort of change 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things in this sentence, but it's all pretty predictable and pretty regular, and the same rules could be applied to any other situation of the dual. Let's take another look. تعرفت على أستاذ الاقتصاد في الحفلة. Here is one other wrinkle. As with other regular plural endings, like the un, in ending that we would use for regular masculine plural, if we have a word that takes one of those regular plurals that ends with a noon, and it's part of an idafa that isn't the final word, we are going to drop that noon. So I would say تعرفت على, we have a preposition here, so if I made ustad in the dual, ordinarily I would add that ain ending, majroor, because of the preposition, but here I'm finishing the idafa with al-iqtisad. Two professors of economics. So what I need to do is drop that noon, and I wind up with ustadhay. Al-iqtisad. The rest of our sentence remains the same. Here's a nice long one. Do you know the new student that wants to study with us? هل تعرف الطالب الجديد الذي يريد أن يدرس معنا? Let's put the case endings on these verbs because it's also going to be important. We have a separate video about verbs in the dual, but this can be kind of an introduction. Okay. هل تعرف الطالب الجديد? Well, تعرف is a verb, and الطالب الجديد is mansoob because it's the object of that verb. المفعول به. So we're going to say instead هل تعرف الطالب, but now I need my dual ending. It's mansoob. الطالبين الجديدين. Now I have this pronoun here, الذي, that, the two students who, or that, the relative pronoun. So here I need, again, the mansoob version, because الطالبين الجديدين, the noun that it's referring to, is mansoob. اللذين, and here I'm going to conjugate the verbs differently as well. I'm running out of space here. اللذين يريدان أن يدرس معنا. Long sentence. هل تعرف الطالبين الجديدين اللذين يريدان أن يدرسا معنا? How it's a bit contrived, but it gets the point across, right? Do you know the two new students who both of them want to study with us? Notice that we do have different verb forms in the dual as well for the marfu' and the mansub verbs. You can see more examples of that in our video on verbs in dual because they tend to have their own specific patterns as well. Once again, it can seem like a lot of information to absorb all at once, but if you practice just converting some simple sentences from the singular to the dual, you'll discover that it really is a very regular process and we can count on seeing the same patterns. There aren't too many strange exceptions floating around.